The clock is still ticking on TikTok, but a little slower now. President Trump announcing he's extending the sale or ban law on the popular social media app for 75 more days. This is the second time that the president has extended the deadline, and sources tell ABC News Amazon wants in on the app. So joining us now to talk everything TikTok is chief correspondent at Business Insider, Peter Kafka. Peter, it is great to have you here because there's a lot to talk about. First, you called it in your article on Thursday saying that President Trump would push back this ban and keep TikTok operating as normal. So where do things stand right now as this ban has been delayed?
I mean, there is nothing happening right now. In theory, the Trump administration is trying to put together a deal that would bring in new investors to buy a portion of TikTok, sort of create a U.S. version of TikTok that would be majority owned by U.S. investors. They think that would satisfy a law. The problem with that is in order for that deal to go through, ByteDance, which owns TikTok, would have to agree to that deal. More importantly, the Chinese government would have to approve that deal. There's no indication that China is interested in selling off part of TikTok. It seems very unlikely that it's going to happen right now at the beginning of a really hot trade war.
And Peter, right now, let's talk about Amazon, because Amazon is reportedly interested in buying TikTok. So do you think they're a top contender? And would the app change under a new company's ownership? Because the secret sauce of the app is really its algorithm, and ByteDance wants to keep that for themselves.
So the first question is, I don't think Amazon is a serious contender. They don't seem to be treated that way by the White House, which is, again, steering all of this. There are a bunch of other folks who've also raised their hand and said they would also like to own U.S. TikTok. You could raise your hand and say you'd like to own U.S. TikTok. But unless the U.S. government wants that to happen, it's not going to happen. The idea for the deal they do want to happen is to leave TikTok pretty much intact. It's an open question about who would control that algorithm. If you remember the debate about TikTok staying in the U.S. last year, there was a big fear that if algorithm wasn't controlled by U.S. companies, it could be manipulated by China for whatever means. And it's totally unclear right now as to what happens to that algorithm. For a regular user, though, I don't think they're going to see any difference one way or the other.
In your article, you also say that Trump is ignoring a law that was upheld by the Supreme Court just a day before he was inaugurated. Basically, this law says that the president can grant a one-time 90-day extension before the app is banned, contingent on there actually also being movement towards a deal. So what do you make of this second extension?
I mean, the whole thing is kind of extraordinary. In a different world, you'd see people jumping up and down and saying, hey, there's a law. Congress passed it, the president signed it, the Supreme Court upheld it, and the new president is saying, I'm just going to ignore that law. You would think people would be complaining about that. Obviously, in the new Trump administration, there's a lot going on, and no one seems to want to complain about the fact that the president seems to be ignoring a pretty clear-cut law.
But let's talk about the tariffs here, because this could play a role here. Trump has also mentioned that using tariffs as leverage for China here could work, saying, quote, he hoped to continue working in good faith with China. So how could those reciprocal tariffs influence how this TikTok deal goes?
This has been on Trump's radar for a long time. You saw him saying this last fall. It definitely was on his mind when he became president again in January. The idea that ownership of TikTok was worth a lot. It could be worth a lot to the U.S. It could be worth a lot to China, and there could be a deal done. And I think he's always sort of suggested that the tariffs would be part of that deal. Donald Trump likes to do deals, and I think in his mind, there's a world where China gives up something, i.e. ownership of TikTok, and they see the tariffs reduced a little bit. But again, we don't know how China wants to play that, and TikTok's an enormously valuable asset for that company, for that country. I don't know whether they want to give up any ownership of it at all.
Well, if we sort of pitch in together, I'm sure we can both put a bid in for TikTok.
Save your pennies.
Yeah. Peter Kafka, thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.